Okay, my dogs are outside, which is kind of fortunate. I was going to talk about a couple of dreams I did while trying to work on things. I'm actually working on a foam sculpture. This is part of the Godzilla I made. And I use Loctite insulation foam to get it done. I wasn't going to talk too much about anything. It's probably going to be a Christmas sculpture. Something like, more than likely, Santa Claus. I need to cut the body. But primarily what I wanted to do is talk about dreams. I had some interesting dreams yesterday. And quite often you don't have the time to put down everything in a day. Because of that, ideas, it's really easy to lose them. And if you lose an idea, it's almost like you never had it. Foam likes water, so let's put in water over my work area. And then I'm going to cut this foam. So, the dreams I was going to talk about, one dream yesterday, it was real interesting. It was kind of like the Sumerian gods, and which probably won't make much sense, but I'll kind of explain it a little bit more. So, I'm dreaming of this immortal thing. It's basically like a human, but not really. Kind of like a superhero. And for those of you not familiar, one of the first things written actually comes from Sumeria. And it's written by this thing that calls itself Enki. Its name changes in tense as it does things, and so it calls itself Enkidu. And it describes a fall to the earth. But they're these basically superpowered things. And these are conspiracy theories, the stuff of, because apparently these creatures made the pyramids, and they're what we consider pantheons of gods. And so like the Greek gods, the Mayan gods, the Egyptian gods, the Norse gods, they're all kind of related to this weird old-time story of these super celestial things coming to Earth. So in my dream, I have a dream of a creature like this. And it's kind of loosely human. It doesn't even resemble it really. It's just kind of, it has the shape of a human. Kind of like an engineer from Aliens. But that too was based on these mythologies. So this thing gets trapped underwater. And its body is like a superhero. So it's kind of like Luke Cage or something. And so it's super powered, but not like completely invulnerable. It gets lured into an ocean with predatory sharks, predatory fishies. And in the deep ocean, it's actually getting eaten over and over again. But the problem is that nothing can digest it. And so its matter, as it gets eaten, this human-like life form that's male, it gets pulled apart by these sea creatures just enough. This is like in the deep ocean, several thousand feet deep, on some planet that's similar to Earth, but not quite. And it gets pulled apart enough to be eaten, but it starts to reknit itself. And so the thing that ate it can't digest it. And so it keeps on getting spit out or pooped out, and then another fishy thing will eat it. I kind of made this piece good. Doesn't want to come apart. So this guy, this godlike thing, finally manages to escape. And in doing so, he's stuck on the ocean floor. And other sea things are trying to eat it and stuff like that. And so he manages to run around and survive for a little. And in doing so, finally manages to break free of the planet, the gravity, and get out of the water. But it was led there by some other weird things. And so that'll actually get more revealed later in the dream. So this thing can travel in deep space, this human-like thing. It first freezes, and then after it freezes, it steers itself towards a black hole. And it seems weird because it's like this, it's crystalloid now, like ice. And it doesn't make sense. Like, why is this thing steering itself towards a black hole? But it is. And it gets chewed up by the black hole. But just like the other things, the other monsters and stuff that were eating it, they can't actually dissolve it. This guy, this godlike guy. And so then he gets partially absorbed. And in getting partially absorbed by the black hole, he gets crushed, but he starts to reform. And so this is where kind of the dream, it's just so hard to even like perceive like something like this happening. I mean, it's just kind of, it's mind-bending. And so this guy gets chewed up and spit out by a black hole, and he's kind of like cosmic bits. And when he comes out on the other side, he's actually coming out on the sun. It's like the sun spit him out. So I found super interesting, because the black hole and the sun were the same thing. One was just one of the black hole was just, I guess, one end of the sun, and so the spitting out was another end and another part of that process. Super, super interesting. So he gets spit out, and as he does so, he starts to reform. And this guy is kind of predatory. He has like this weird sort of like, almost like he's hunting. And he's actually hunting for siblings, other gods. And so as he reforms, he becomes like the celestial being, almost like a Superman. And he's surfing into the sky. And as he's surfing into the sky, he's looking for a life-bearing planet. Now, as it turns out, these life-bearing planets are also gods. They're twin gods. And I wasn't really sure if they were just male or if they were male and female. But these other deities are actually a little bit different because they sacrifice their life, their body essence, to make a planet and to make life on a planet. We let the foam dry for a little bit. So they're making life from every cell in their body. And when they do this, it actually causes, I guess, a cycle where they have to, like, anything that's alive has to eat the life of these deities. And there's one that's kind of night and day. And what it reminded me of is like the Norse myth where the wolf Fenris is actually chasing a chariot, and there are these twins on a chariot, and they're basically having the sun with them, but the wolf chases them and it brings darkness. So it's kind of doing this sort of thing. Meanwhile, this predatory guy, who's like a giant shark that was eaten by sharks, he was lured into an ocean through a different reality. He actually crosses from a black hole from one reality to another. And the way this kind of worked, I mean, I'm trying to use words to describe something that really was just like impressive and almost didn't make sense. It was just like melting my mind type of dream. The one side of the galaxy where the black hole was at, which is like a vortex, like a little funnel that pulls everything, it actually was pulling energy and matter into a different but parallel reality. And the way this worked was like an hourglass. When you flip the hourglass, the sand comes down and it actually goes into the bottom of the hourglass. Well, that was light, that was energy, that was matter, the creative things. And it was actually pulling it into another galaxy. another reality. So as one reality grew, the other one died. And then as the other one died, the other reality grew. And so the beings that actually, the godlike things that were human in form, that sacrificed their bodies, it took two of them to make like a planet like Earth where the life lived there. They actually kind of decompose and dissipate to create the life on the planet. And this thing came from one, this predator guy, this predator god, like a hunter god. It came from one, but purpose was to destroy it. And so even though it could get hurt, and it could, like if you hit it with a truck or an atomic bomb, it would actually come apart to a degree. It would actually reknit itself. And it was like a larger size human, maybe a human that's 9 feet tall. And again, superpowered. If you shot it with a bullet, the bullet would bounce off its chest. But it wasn't invulnerable. I mean, you could make it bleed and things, but it just knit itself back together. What it could do when it reached these planets was actually find, like on the planets where these other gods knit themselves together to create life, they would actually almost pin themselves into reality, like with push pins. And the push pins were actually kind of like their matter, their energy, like their spiritual nature, but it's literally push pinned in. And these actually created like a diverse ecosystem, like plants and animals and insects, but they were push pins into what the fabric of space-time was. And so the hunter god could actually undo the push pins, and it would create chaos in the forms of these life-bearing things. And I think it liked to create mayhem, war, and pain because it could. No other reason. And so it's actually looking for the spots where deities like this created life to hunt them down and unravel it. Now, as that happened, they would funnel back onto the other side. They would actually drift into black holes on the new reality, and they would funnel through until they were spit out like a sun. But this didn't always happen. So the creative deities weren't always caught. They weren't always taken apart. There were several sets. I just saw one. But they were rare. They were rare across the fabric of space-time. They actually, as things drifted and as the sand actually got heavy towards the base, they would actually cross over to the other side to recreate life and begin the cycle anew, and then it would flip. And so the reason why this was like an alternate reality is that because it's kind of like a string theory thing, but every little cell in my body, every molecule was part of something else once. That's just what it was. I mean, maybe it could have been bumblebees, it could have been grass, could have been turds, but it's biomatter that was part of something else. Maybe even dinosaurs, who knows? It could have just been laying there, plankton. So whenever things coalesced and formed into creatures, it actually was magnetized in a way that it would slingshot. And so if I was a plankton, I would become a plankton in this new reality. But I'd be like an inverted kind of mirror image plankton. But it would progress as my matter kind of yo-yoed, it fluctuated. And the sum of me, the pieces, like the pieces that were of me that were an ant once, would form an ant, and they would coexist with the pieces of me that were a snail and a plant, etc. But ultimately, it was like dominoes. This situation happened and happened until I actually coalesced, and I existed as an exact but different version of myself with the same matter in a different reality, kind of ionized slightly different, and becoming an alternate version of me in an alternate world that I existed. And this, as it changed, as this oscillation happened, and you're dying, you're reborn, you're changing shapes into forms, into different life forms, and then actually transcending into nothing and crossing over through the black hole and being crushed into oblivion to be spewed out and re-knit into something else by these deities that basically sacrifice their bodies each time in twins, like a pairs, to create life. And some of them were feminine, some of them were male, and some of them were male, female. And nothing had genitalia. The only thing is like in persona, in spirit, like they were more masculine. Because again, these things weren't human. They the closest thing would be like a celestial human. Like if you made a bunch of like Christmas lights, not the lights themselves, but the energy that the lights made, what you see as illumination. If you knit that into a form, that's what it was like. They were like star things. But their form actually had physical matter. It was just wasn't matter in any sort of way that we could perceive it. It's literally like glowing living light, but it's energy and it's our biomatter. And so it's just at a different state, almost like superheated and just in a different thing. And it could coexist with us, but something just so foreign, so different. But it had a head and shoulders and arms. I mean, it loosely resembled people and eyes, but at the same time, it was like, what the hell is this? It's not that at all. But anyway, this thing would find the pins, and it was hunting, and it came to Earth. And it came to Earth to destroy everything, to rip it apart. And I think it was like an envy, like an emotion, because it was like an anger envy because it wanted to create, but it couldn't. I don't know if it lost its pair. Very, very strange. While on the planet, these twins that had actually sacrificed themselves still had like a sense of consciousness, but they were split into the life. And so they would try to manipulate things on the planet to try to trap it. So they would try to lure this hunter-like thing to like volcanoes, to trap it in the volcano, to trap it in the magma of the core of the planet. They would try to lure it to the deep ocean where gravity and pressure would hold it down. And beasts of the ocean would just be in a cycle of devouring it. And those things were actually created, these Leviathan-like creatures on the planet were created in an attempt to try to subdue and prey upon this, like these giant lizard, dinosaur, dragon things, depending on where they're at, if they're on the land or in the air or in the ocean, and they would actually consume this thing, and it'd be a hollow consumption because they couldn't eat this predator god. They would just partially consume it and spit it out. And so I saw this life cycle through the universe, through like a dozen lifetimes. And I saw it from the perspective of the hunter, from the things eating it, and then from just being loosely aware as an ant, and then also as a mortal, as like a human-like reincarnation, just very loosely aware. The equivalent of this is like looking at a comic book panel, and when you look at a comic book panel, it seems very rich. And it's like I'm living this reality, like being awake right now and like making things. It's like being on the comic book panel. And in the dream, it's like that comic book panel is suddenly three-dimensional. And so it's awe-inspiring in some ways, absolutely horrific in another. And in another way, very difficult to describe because all these associations I'm making are very loose ones in an attempt to describe things that aren't really human, crossing space and time and the void and matter. And I believe there was a pantheon of these things, and I think some of them actually just specialized in physical matter, like planets and gases. And I think that other ones specialized in life, which were rarer. And then there were other ones that just specialized in destroying things. I mean, some just wanted to destroy matter. Some just wanted to destroy life. And they would go out like predators to destroy these things. It was super, super interesting. The conduits of a black hole actually pinning one reality into another one. And then literally like the black hole being the mouth and the sun being the anus or the butt, or the just vomiting back all the debris and the base materials to be built up again like Legos, was super, super interesting. And there were, and in the state in which these things coexisted, there were these constant forces butting each other and ripping each other apart. And again, that was like the energy, the theme, the mood of these predator-like things, these hunter-like things that were just like these giant sharks in the void, destroying things. And in my mind's eye, the one that I focused on were the ones that were life. And then you had the much rarer ones, the pairs. And they were lesser. They were not as big. I mean, like, if we looked at this like in like a size comparison, the hunters were ogre-like, huge and things. And actually, the creative ones were really small. They were normal mortal size or even really small, like smaller. But they were beings of pure light and energy. And when they came together and worked together, they coalesced and they made a reality. Well, that was my dream. That's the dream of the supernatural part. In the human part, because my human part drifted more towards human things, it was like I was walking with different people. And I was walking with different people through different timelines. And so as I'm walking and having a conversation with somebody, the person that I'm talking to is metamorphosizing. And so they might start out as a kid, then they might be an old man, and then they might be like one of them was this giant professional wrestler. But as the conversation shifted, the person just changed into something completely different. And they started out, sometimes it was like a man, sometimes it was like a woman, sometimes they were friendly, sometimes they were a little bit abrasive. The entire reality around them as they changed would change with them. So I'm walking with a kid, it's in a forest. And it's in a forest that has never been inhabited. And then we see a wolf in the distance. The kid remarks at it. They turn into a giant man, and now we're in a medieval city. And then we're in the middle of the city, and we're talking about things, and then all of a sudden we go back, and we're in an ancient fruit garden, primordial, where there's no life. And I'm not with a man anymore. I'm with a young lady, and she's being flirtatious. And all the while, I'm trying to hold on to, like, what the hell is going on? Going into the future, into the past, with technology, with all sorts of things. And then associatively, like, things are meaningful to me. So, like, one of the things I saw like some Godzilla toys. And those toys actually became primordial, like, dragons, which became dinosaurs, which actually then became bacteria in a nice pond. And then it actually metamorphosized again, and I'm in an ant colony, like a human walking around an ant colony. And then I think I'm in the ant colony, but I'm standing on top of it. It's just wild and wacky. And as this hunter actually got a grip, it would try to rip that apart. And so it was like each paper was a reality, but it would tear them. It'd tear them. And you're running from the pieces. And so all these things are leaving like a trail. And the trails are like books. They started to manifest like that. But the books actually, when you open them up, it's like a doorway into a different state of time and things. But that reality just is getting shredded. And the matter of it's drifting. Sometimes it exploded. But that's how this thing would rip things apart. And there was life, and there was death, and there was rebirth, and there was love, and there was anxiety. One of the big things about this weird wacko dream, tying it up, I mean, where, again, I'm seeing these celestial things, and it's a dream, it's not real. I don't take it as being real. But one of the things that it made me think of is just how petty all our concerns, all our worries, all these things are. Like this genesis of this dreamlike creation, it's actually breathtakingly beautiful, but also so horrific. And so foreboding. And these are the ones that are creating life. The one that was like nefarious, that was hunting, that was like had a perspective to rip things apart. And the one I saw was masculine. It was brutish and masculine, like an intelligent troll made of light. But it just wanted to destroy. It's like a celestial serial killer on a scale that just boggles the mind. Anyhow, I hadn't been able to write about it yet. Sometimes you worry about expressing things too much, because if you talk about it too much, you never put it down to paper. And then this sort of like reflection, it's sometimes an end unto itself. Once you experience it, you tell the story, it just goes away. I would like to use this idea someday in storytelling, like to create a pantheon, a mythos. It'd be also interesting to see if this goes down a rabbit hole to something else? I mean, am I going to think about this more? Are these ideas going to hit like again? Usually one of the things about the creative mind is that when you have an inspiration, if you try to set it aside and you try to dismiss it, it like goes away, but like a boomerang hits you again, more force, and it hits you. And the ideas just haunt you until you do something with them. And that I always find really interesting, because when you think about that, when your mind is so determined to dream, when it's so determined to create, the question has to be asked, is creativity a choice? And often I don't think it is. I think once inspiration strikes, once an idea strikes, it's like the bell being rung, and it's just going to get hit and hit, and it's going to resonate in your head and in your soul until you do something with it. This idea, I think, is a story. I don't know how it would manifest as a sculpture. I'm sure there's like music to it. I mean, like there's like that foreboding, like Halloween Jaws music to the Predator, but then like this kind of uplifting but tragic optimism to the twins who are crossing the bridges of reality to try to create life, literally giving themselves, like, to father it, to mother it. Super, super interesting. And that actually gave me a bias, because whether I wanted to be or not, I was actually a child of the twins. And this predator hunter was an enemy. It was there to rip me apart. But not to end me, just to rip me apart for the sake of it. Just super, super fascinating. Again, very dark, very killer-like, very an unreasoning but malignant intellect, crossing the very bridges of space-time to murder over and over and over again. And it reminded me of that wolf. I mean, I couldn't help but think about that wolf in that chariot with those two people in. I think they're twins, but they're fleeing Fenrir. Or Fenris. And Fenris is bringing the night, but these two twins bring the sun, just long enough to get chased away by Fenris. Anyway, that's my dream. Hopefully it makes sense and I don't sound like too much of a lunatic. I thought about it for almost 24 hours. I mean, just like rocked and just haunted by the imagery. Super, super haunted, moved, inspired, horrified. Yeah. That's the best I could do to describe it. The eternal hunter and the twins running from it, trying to create, like, I'm trying to think, refuges, oases in the universe where they could lay themselves down and literally build life and hope from their bodies. But that life and hope had to consume. It had to stay. It was in this cannibalistic consumption of, it lived, it ate other life force, and then it died, and then was eaten by the life. And that cycle went on as long as it could until a hunter found them and obliterated it. Then they had to cross into another reality. Sorry I'm repeating myself. Just super interesting. And again, like with dreams like this, like really vivid dreams, crazy dreams, they start to run away from you. They start to fade away into nothing, and they'll recoalesce into another inspiration, just like that bell, and hit you again, be almost identical with a little twist on it. That's my dream.